Hey, David Brewster here again with another 3-for-all, and this is 3 pentatonic licks you can shred. And the pentatonic scale is definitely a very common and popular scale with guitarists in pretty much every style of music. Rock and metal and blues and funk and country and jazz. You'll find this scale used everywhere in guitar music. You can name any famous guitarist, and I can pretty much guarantee they've probably either embraced the scale or used it in their career, and that includes, everybody from B.B. King and Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton and Van Halen and Kirk Hammett and Dimebag Darrell, Randy Rhoads, and, Zakk Wylde and a whole bunch of guitarists have used this. But that also includes people like Scott Henderson and John Scofield and, jazz players and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Albert King and blues players, Albert Lee and Brent Mason and country players. Everybody that you can think of has used this scale at some point. Paul Gilbert has nicknamed the scale, the scale that wouldn't die, because the pentatonic scale is eternally useful, and it just keeps, kind of reappearing and, being used by guitarists for decades and decades and decades and decades. So this is very, very common. And, but what we're going to look at in this lesson is some unusual or different approaches. We're going to kind of break away from just being locked or confined to a single position or the pentatonic box. We're going to look for some ways of kind of moving the scale around the fretboard. And, for a lot of guitarists, it is a streamlined scale. You've got 2 notes per string, with most fingerings. And that does make it really nice and efficient for picking, because if you're using alternate picking with a 2-string scale, you're going to have a downstroke and an upstroke on each string, so that makes it really nice and efficient to pick through. But I think a lot of guitarists and students I've worked with over the years have commented that it's kind of hard to shred or kind of blaze through the scale. The first thing we're going to do here, we're going to start in the key of B minor. That's just going to kind of put us basically in the middle of the fretboard. It's not precisely in the center or the middle of the fretboard, but it does kind of give us kind of a comfortable area to start from here. And of course you can move this to other keys and other positions. You don't have to lock into the key of B. You can put it in C sharp or A or F or whatever key you want to play it in. But just to get started here, we're going to start in B. But in the key of B minor, the most popular fingering for the scale would be right here in the 7th position. The old minor pentatonic box, right? So we're not going to play with that, but we are going to play with notes from that scale. And we're going to stay in that key. But the first thing we're going to try here is we're going to do a string skipping kind of intervallic approach to that scale. So I'm still going to play the B minor pentatonic scale, but I'm not going to play it, limited to just a single position like that across the strings. I'm going to do something like this. And there, all we're basically doing is skipping strings throughout the scale. There you can see we're moving, from B to D, and then A to B. And then we're basically moving up to the next position of B minor pentatonic and grabbing F sharp, A, E, and F sharp. And I kind of like that sound, that intervallic jump, because we're starting on a B and ending on a B, but there's a skip, between the notes there. And the same thing happened here. We started on F sharp and ended on F sharp, but there's like a little leap, between those the octaves. So those 2 fingering shapes are identical there too. If we move up and grab this D note here on the 12th fret, we're going to grab D and E, and then also B and D. So the fingering shape that we started with is kind of flipped around backwards. Because there's a whole step, and there's a minor third, like the shape. Now if we take that fingering that we just uncovered there and start on A, move to B, play F sharp, and then grab A, we're just basically mirroring that same fingering that we had here. And we're just basically approaching that high B way up there. And I hit that with a bend. Now you can pick through it like that. You can also use legato. if you want a little smoother kind of sound and you don't want that kind of, broken up alternate pick sound. But that's a really cool approach to the minor pentatonic scale, and you can definitely tell, like with your ear, that doesn't sound like the box anymore. It sounds like this, wild, kind of rock or jazzy, kind of lick. And it also sounds cool if you descend through that pattern. So you can definitely take that both ways. The next idea that we're going to tap into here is known as a stretch pentatonic shape. And I picked this up from people like Paul Gilbert and John Petrucci, but I've also noticed Zach Wilde and a whole bunch of guitarists out there have kind of adapted this to their style and their playing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the B minor box, but we're also going to pinpoint and target notes from the next position. So there's the box fingering, like let's just call that shape 1. Now right next door is shape 2, we'll call it. And those are basically, connected shapes. They're both B minor pentatonic. They're just different fingerings. They have the same notes, in a slightly different order. This shape starts on a lower B. This, shape starts there on the D. But they're both B minor pentatonic. So what we're going to do is grab, the B, the D, and also the E on the low E string here. So we're going to grab 3 notes on one string. So that's obviously a bigger stretch, which is why this is called a stretch pentatonic. But we've got B, D, and E. We're going to skip over the A string, and on the D string, we're going to grab A, B, and D, or 7, 9, and 12. So the fingering there moved from 7, 10, 12 to 7, 9, 12. Then we're going to jump over the G string and go to the B and grab an F sharp, an A, and a B, or 7, 10, 12. So we're kind of mirroring the shape that we started with on the low E on the B string. So this is a very demanding fingering, but once you get used to the stretch and kind of get used to the pattern, it's a really cool sounding variation of the minor pentatonic scale. So slowly, you could use hammer-ons, like that, pull-offs. You could pick through it. But what I like to do is just kind of run it, with legato, and just kind of fly through it. Something like that. And you can also add slides. You can slide down to, say, the flat 7 there, that A. You could also, with your pinky there, you could slide up and maybe grab, say, this D note, which is still, in the key of B minor. You could also tap that note. Once you have that fingering under your belt, you can basically just shift that over to the next set of strings and locate another key. So there was B minor with the stretch pentatonic. Let's lock into that same fingering, but just like somebody pushed your hand over. Just kind of scoot everything over a set of strings, and now do that same run on the A, G, and high E strings. So instead of this, you're going to have this. Now when you move it, that's basically now E minor. And the same rules apply. You can slide on the bottom, you can slide on the top, you can tap slide. You can definitely play around with that fingering and that pattern. So in the grand scheme of things, there's the 1 chord, and we just found the 4 chord, which would be E. We could also move that up to the 5 chord, which would be F sharp. And there I just took the same fingering and shape that we had for E and just moved it up a whole step. So there's a 1, 4, 5 in B minor. There's B, E, and F sharp, which is really cool. The last example here is an intervallic sliding lick. And this is pretty crazy. we moved from B to E minor in that last example. Well, I'm going to keep it in the key of E minor for this. So I've kind of shifted to E minor pentatonic instead of B. But I mainly did that so you can kind of see this interesting, kind of slippery idea. And this is really unusual. It's kind of a combination of some things I saw Paul Gilbert do, Steve Vai do, and a handful of other guitarists too. But what we're going to do is we're going to target the B and the high E string. And we're going to do this kind of cascading, sliding legato lick that's going to kind of skate around those top two strings. And I'm just targeting notes from E minor pentatonic, but I'm doing it in a very unusual way, which is that intervallic sound. There's leaps and jumps between the patterns and the notes. So it's not just straight through the scale. It's almost like you're jumping around through the scale. Now, if I play that slowly, you can probably uncover a little bit more of what I was doing there. Well, that's going to wrap up this 3-for-all lesson, and please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back with some more 3-for-all and chord play and content very soon. Thank you.